A nurse warned the millionaire not to attend his party. 3 hours later, he discovered the scary truth. "Mr. Garrison, don't go to your party tonight. Please, you have to believe me." Nurse Brooke Hayes's urgent words hung in the air of the private hospital suite. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor underscored the tension between her and James Garrison, the renowned tech millionaire. Tall windows overlooked the city skyline, where neon lights flickered against a twilight sky. James paused, tie half knotted around his crisp collar. He'd come for a final stress test, a precaution after a minor cardiac scare last month, yet found himself confronted by a far more pressing concern. Brooke had burst into his room, eyes wide with alarm. She was not one to panic easily. In fact, she'd calmly guided him through his most recent health crisis. But now, her composure seemed to hang by a thread. He cleared his throat, trying to project calm. "Brooke, you've been my nurse for a year. I trust you. But you have to explain what's going on. Why can't I attend my own gala? This is a major fundraiser for children's robotics education, a cause we've both championed. Canceling now would be a disaster." She swallowed hard, glancing at the open door to ensure they were alone. "I overheard something in the waiting room," she began, voice low. "A man was on his phone talking about you. At first I thought it was a standard conversation. People gossip about you all the time, being a public figure. But then he mentioned your heart condition, your schedule tonight, and," she hesitated, pulse visibly throbbing in her neck, "the word removal, like he was planning to remove you, permanently." James's expression darkened. "That's quite an allegation. Did you get a look at him?" Brooke nodded. He was tall, maybe early 40s, wearing a charcoal suit. He had your name scribbled on a notepad with the words "Tonight, 9 p.m. Arrival." When I asked if he needed help, he pocketed the notepad and bolted. Security tried to follow, but he vanished into the parking lot. A cold knot formed in James's gut. Threats weren't new in his world: rivals, disgruntled ex-employees, unscrupulous investors. Usually his security team dealt with them swiftly. But if someone had tracked him to his private hospital room, it meant they were bold, organized, or both. Brooke reached into her scrub pocket, producing a small slip of paper. He dropped this. "It's a partial copy of tonight's gala guest list. Your name is circled in red ink, with a question mark next to it." He studied the note, heart pounding. "So you think he plans to show up at my event, or orchestrate something dangerous?" "Isn't it obvious?" she asked, voice trembling. "He knows your schedule, your condition, your vulnerabilities. You've been in and out of the hospital. You're not at full strength." James bristled at the mention of his frailty. In truth, he was still under doctor's orders to avoid stress. "I can't just skip," he said, forcing steadiness into his tone. "Donors are flying in from all over the country. The children's robotics program depends on tonight's pledges." Brooke's eyes flashed with frustration. "That program means the world to me, too, but not if it costs you your life." He squeezed the slip of paper between his fingers. "I have an extensive security detail, led by Winston Reyes. He's ex-military. If there's a credible threat, they'll keep me safe." "Threats can slip through the cracks," Brooke insisted. "Let me come with you, just as a precaution. I can watch for anything strange and keep an eye on your vitals. You'll need monitoring anyway, right?" James exhaled. "Fine," he said, relenting to her resolve. "I appreciate how much you care. But if this is real, we have to act carefully." He grabbed his phone. "I'll call Winston, inform him of everything you heard. We'll triple-check the guest list, coordinate with local law enforcement if needed, and keep the event on track. Understood?" Brooke nodded, though worry etched her features. "Understood. Just promise me one thing, Mr. Garrison. If we see any sign of trouble, you won't hesitate to leave. $1 million fundraiser isn't worth your life." He gave her a faint, reassuring smile. "I promise. Now let's go. We only have 3 hours until showtime." They left the hospital suite side by side, tension thick enough to taste. In the corridor, James's security personnel formed a protective flank around him. Camera flashes erupted from a few lurking paparazzi, no doubt curious why a high-profile millionaire was at the hospital so close to his gala. But James ignored them, heart drumming. As they reached the elevator, Brooke's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, her face paling. "What is it?" James asked. Her voice shook. A message from an unknown number: "Leave the party to stay alive, or face the consequences." Someone clearly wanted him away from that gala. and it was too late to pretend none of this was real. By 7 p.m., James Garrison's sprawling lakeside estate was already a hive of activity. Limousines rolled up the curved driveway, delivering an eclectic mix of corporate titans, Hollywood celebrities, and philanthropic families. Towering palm trees lined the entrance, sparkling with fairy lights, while a red carpet shimmered under discreet LED spotlights. Inside, the grand foyer showcased an artful arrangement of robotics displays, miniature drone prototypes, and mechanical arms showcasing the breakthroughs James's foundation sought to bring to underprivileged kids. Soft jazz music floated from the central ballroom, where caterers in pristine uniforms glided between tables laden with gourmet hors d'oeuvres. Standing at the top of a marble staircase, James surveyed the scene below, heart pounding beneath his tailored tuxedo. Usually he thrived at events like this, charming donors, forging new alliances, but tonight, each fresh arrival seemed tinged with menace. Brooke Hayes hovered nearby, wearing a simple black cocktail dress that contrasted sharply with her nurse's badge pinned discreetly at her waist. She clasped a small medical kit, overshadowed by her vigilant gaze. Winston Reyes, head of security, stood to James's other side, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-50s, hair streaked with silver. His calm, methodical demeanor radiated competence. "We have guards posted at every entry and exit," Winston murmured. "All staff were vetted, but we're performing additional checks. Local police have a unit stationed outside the gates. If someone tries anything, they'll be neutralized quickly." James inclined his head, resisting the urge to fidget. "Good. I want everyone safe, guests, staff, all of them. Any suspicious characters yet?" Winston scanned the swirling crowd. "Nothing conclusive. Just keep your distance from large gatherings. We've set up a private lounge if you need a moment to regroup." Brooke frowned. "He'll need more than that if the stress spikes his heart rate." "James, don't push yourself. Remember your doctor's warning." James forced a smile he didn't feel. "I'll be careful, nurse." He had intended the remark to be light-hearted, but his voice carried undercurrents of tension. By 7:45 p.m., the party was in full swing, the music crescendoing, conversations flowing. In a normal scenario, James would have found the atmosphere exhilarating. Tonight, the boisterous laughter and clink of champagne glasses felt like an ominous drumroll. He accepted polite greetings and handshakes, all the while scanning for the unknown face that might be plotting to remove him. Midway through greeting a major donor, James noticed Brooke stiffen nearby. Her eyes locked on a man standing near the robotic arm exhibit. He wore an elegant suit, a bright red tie, and an expression that flickered with unease. Brooke excused herself from James's side, drifting closer to get a better look. The man seemed to sense her scrutiny. He abruptly turned, disappearing into the hallway leading to the service area. Brooke, adrenaline surging, beckoned quietly to Winston. "There, he's leaving," she whispered. "No name tag, no visible invitation." I caught him staring at James. Winston nodded sharply. "I'll check it out. You stay with Mr. Garrison." Moments later, Winston slipped into the hallway in pursuit. Brooke returned to James, discreetly relaying what she'd seen. His stomach twisted. "We can't assume everyone without a name tag is an assassin, but we can't ignore it either," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "I want to know who that was." The minutes inched by, tension coiling. Then, suddenly, James's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. A text from Winston. "Lost him in the staff corridor. Checking the perimeter. Will update." James showed it to Brooke. Her lips thinned. "So he got away. Do you see why I wanted you to cancel?" she asked quietly. Before James could respond, a thunderous crash resonated from across the ballroom. Gasps and shrieks rippled through the crowd. They turned to see one of the robotic displays, an intricate, full-scale mechanical exoskeleton, toppled over. Glass shards from a nearby display case littered the floor, shining under the chandelier lights. A woman clutched at her arm, blood trickling through her fingers. One of the metal components had sliced her when the exoskeleton crashed. In the sudden panic, guests scrambled back, forming a ring around the wreckage. Staff rushed in with towels and first aid kits. James and Brooke dashed forward, heart hammering. The exoskeleton had been stable earlier. Could it have been tampered with? James's mind raced, an act of sabotage to sow chaos, or a near miss intended to harm him or someone close by. Brooke knelt beside the injured guest, pressing gauze to the wound. She cast James a worried look. If that thing had tipped a few feet closer, it could have crushed someone. James felt a surge of cold dread. The malicious orchestration of this night was becoming clearer. Whatever was happening, it was no simple coincidence. The party that should have celebrated hope and innovation was turning into a swirling storm of danger, and it was still hours from ending. The immediate aftermath of the exoskeleton collapse was a tangle of raised voices, shattered glass, and urgent medical care. Security personnel ushered the rattled guests to safer areas, while Winston Reyes radioed for reinforcements to comb the mansion's interior. Lights flickered as the elaborate LED system adjusted in response to a sudden power surge, another sign something was off. Brooke helped the wounded woman onto a nearby chair. Despite the blood, the gash was superficial. "Keep pressure here," Brooke instructed gently. "I'll get you a paramedic." A roving medical technician arrived soon after, taking over treatment. James hovered anxiously, trying to reassure the frightened onlookers. "The situation's under control," he told them, mustering a steady tone. "Our staff will investigate what caused that equipment to fall." Yet inside, James felt anything but calm. He pulled Brooke aside. Could that exoskeleton have been sabotaged? Bolts loosened, cable snipped. She gave a grim nod. "It's possible. I inspected the exhibit earlier, and the base seemed secure. Something changed between then and now." Winston Reyes stepped up, listening to his earpiece. The lines in his forehead deepened. "Our team did a quick check. Some supports on the exoskeleton stand were forcibly tampered with. Tools left behind. We have them bagged for fingerprints." He paused. "And the man in the red tie is nowhere to be found." James cursed under his breath. "Any sign of forced entry or suspicious vehicles?" "Not yet," Winston said, lips pressed thin. "We're monitoring the gates. I have more men posted inside now." "I'd recommend you temporarily suspend the event, sir. Or at least minimize the crowd while we sweep for more hazards." James swallowed, fighting an internal battle. Canceling the event would mean letting down thousands of children, hoping for scholarship funds. But continuing in the face of mounting threats seemed foolish. He turned to see a cluster of donors glancing nervously his way. If he pulled the plug without explanation, it could trigger a stampede or a rumor mill about bombs. Brooke laid a hand on his arm. "James, your vow to help kids is admirable, but how many more accidents need to happen before you take cover?" He raked a hand through his hair. "Okay, we'll scale back. Winston, announce we're moving the main fundraiser presentation to the East Wing Lounge. Smaller space, easier to secure. Let guests who want to leave go quietly, but don't force an immediate mass evacuation." Winston nodded. "Understood. I'll coordinate." As Winston departed, James exhaled shakily. "I have this awful feeling we're dancing on a razor's edge." Brooke met his gaze. "So do I. We can't let our guard down for a second." By 8:30 p.m., half the guests had trickled out, spooked by rumors of sabotage. The rest gathered in the East Wing Lounge, an elegant room with wood-paneled walls and plush seating. A single, smaller bar replaced the grand spread in the ballroom. Outside the lounge, security formed a perimeter. James and Brooke stood near a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the moonlit lake. Soft murmurs of conversation filled the lounge, accompanied by the muted clink of glasses. On a normal night, the tranquil setting would be perfect for intimate fundraising. Now it felt like a fortress, with tension swirling beneath the polite facade. Suddenly, James's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, heart jolting at the unknown number. The text read, "Leave now, Doe, or we'll do more than tip over displays. This is your final warning." He gritted his teeth and showed it to Brooke. Her face paled. "They're taunting you. We need to alert Winston." Before they could seek Winston, a server approached with a tray of refreshments. James waved him off politely, mind spinning. Then the overhead lights flickered again, a surge that made the lounge guests glance upward uneasily. "I'll check the circuit room." Winston's voice suddenly crackled through James's earpiece, as if reading his mind. "We're getting strange power fluctuations. Stay in the lounge." James touched the earpiece. "Roger that." But only a few minutes later, muffled shouts echoed from the corridor. Brooke and James exchanged alarmed glances. They rushed toward the lounge doors, ignoring the hush of concerned guests behind them. In the hallway, one of Winston's men lay sprawled on the floor, unconscious. A second guard crouched over him, checking vitals. Several yards beyond them, a door leading to the basement stairs was open, flickering light emanating from within. James's stomach flipped. If an assailant had gone downstairs, where the main power lines ran, he could cause a catastrophic fire or explosion. Brooke locked eyes with James. "Stay back," she warned. We don't know what's down there." But James shook his head. "I won't let someone sabotage my home or endanger more lives." He grabbed a flashlight from the guard and, together with Brooke, cautiously descended the dimly lit staircase. The air smelled of old concrete and dust, a stark contrast to the polished floors above. Distant hums of machinery reverberated against the walls. Midway down, the basement corridor branched left and right. "Which way to the circuit panels?" Brooke whispered. James nodded to the right. The glow of an overhead bulb flickered ominously. They crept along, hearts pounding. Rounding a corner, they found Winston kneeling near an open fuse box, investigating severed wires. He looked up, face lined with worry. "Someone cut the main cables," he hissed. "We're running on partial generator power, but if they do more damage..." A metallic clang echoed behind them. Winston shot to his feet, gun drawn. James raised the flashlight beam, revealing a figure in dark clothing hunched over a second fuse box. They turned, face masked by a black hood. Their eyes glittered with malice. "Stop!" Winston barked. But the intruder yanked a lever on the panel. Sparks showered, and the hallway light died. Everything went pitch black except for the flashlight's narrow cone. Then came a frantic scuffle. Winston lunged. The intruder twisted free. Brooke gasped as she felt a rush of air and footsteps darting away, deeper into the labyrinth of the basement. The smell of burnt plastic and ozone filled the corridor. After them. James shouted. His voice echoed eerily in the darkness. Winston sprinted, flashlight bobbing ahead, with James and Brooke close behind. But the intruder moved like a phantom, slipping behind pipes and crates. A side door slammed somewhere ahead, followed by heavy footsteps ascending another stairwell. By the time Winston reached the door, all that remained was an empty corridor. They were too late, and the basement crackled with half-dead wiring, a hazard that could ignite or fail completely at any moment. Tense and breathless, James turned to Winston. "Is the estate about to lose total power?" Winston frowned grimly. "Quite possibly. And if they've set any other device or trap, it might be triggered by a power surge. We need to regroup, secure the building, and warn everyone." With no guarantee they could contain the threat, James felt dread tighten his chest. The saboteurs had gotten closer, more brazen, and they weren't done yet. Events spiraled quickly after the near attack in the basement. Winston coordinated security via radio, urging all remaining guests to gather on the front lawn for a precautionary evacuation. The last thing anyone wanted was to be trapped in the mansion if the power failed, or if hidden explosives lurked in the walls. Soon, the East Wing lounge emptied, uneasy partygoers trickling outside. The mild evening air hummed with tension. Police cars and an ambulance arrived, red and blue lights bathing the estate's ornate facade. Alarm chatter rippled through the crowd, but for the moment order prevailed. No one was injured beyond minor scrapes, and no mass panic had broken out. James Garrison stood near the circular driveway fountain, flanked by Brooke and Winston. His tuxedo jacket felt heavier with each passing minute, as if weighed down by the dread of seeing his philanthropic dream crumble into chaos. From across the lawn, the deserted mansion loomed eerily. A police lieutenant named Morgan approached, notepad in hand. "Mr. Garrison, we have your statement on the sabotage. Any idea who might be behind this?" James shook his head, frustration evident. "I've got no shortage of enemies, but no direct evidence. We saw a man in a red tie inside who disappeared. And we just confronted another figure in the basement, hooded, possibly a second accomplice." Morgan nodded. "We'll run ID checks on any suspicious staff. My team is sweeping the interior for bombs or incendiary devices. Until we're sure it's clear, we suggest no one returns inside." Brooke gripped James's arm. "Didn't you say earlier you saw footprints near the lake path? Or was that Winston?" Winston spotted some tracks by the orchard, James corrected, glancing at the security chief. "That might be an escape route to the back gate." Morgan tapped her pen. "I'll send an officer to check it." She pivoted to Winston. "Stay on this channel. Update me if you see anything unusual." As Morgan departed, Winston's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, face darkening. "Sir, more trouble. One of our perimeter guards near the orchard is missing." No response. James swore under his breath. "They might be targeting your team one by one." Brooke's eyes darted worriedly over the lawn. "This is insane. Why risk all this chaos? If the goal was just to harm you, James, they'd have tried a more direct approach." He exhaled, chest tight. "Maybe they want to sabotage my reputation, ruin the biggest fundraiser I've hosted to date." A sense of defeat flickered in his eyes. If so, they've succeeded. This event is in shambles. Suddenly, the main foyer lights flickered ominously, then dimmed. A collective gasp rose from the guests outside. Moments later, the entire mansion went dark, only faint moonlight outlining its architectural silhouette. Even the decorative exterior bulbs fizzled out. Winston turned his gaze to James. We're down to emergency power in a few zones, if that. The saboteur must have severed the final lines. The building's effectively offline. James let out a ragged breath. Lieutenant Morgan's men are still inside. How will they search in pitch black? Winston was already speaking into his radio. Static crackled, punctuated by brief voices. They have flashlights and backup gear. But it's risky. A tense minute ticked by. Then Winston stiffened, pressing a hand to his earpiece. New update, the orchard side gate is open. They suspect the intruder may have escaped. The orchard guard is found unconscious, still breathing, but no sign of the assailant. James's shoulders sagged. So that's it. They're gone. The triumphant roar of an engine suddenly tore through the night. Everyone turned to see headlights blazing near the far side of the property. A sleek black SUV sped out from behind the stables, smashing through a lower fence with a shower of splintered wood, then skidding onto the winding driveway. Police and security rushed after it, shouting commands. Winston and James instinctively ducked behind a stone planter, Brooke following suit. The SUV tore across the grass, ignoring the main exit. As it passed, James glimpsed two silhouettes inside, faces obscured by tinted glass and the reflection of swirling red and blue police lights. Officers opened fire at the fleeing vehicle's tires. Gunshots echoed across the lawn. The SUV swerved violently, fishtailing, then slammed into a decorative fountain with a bone-jarring crunch. Steam erupted from its mangled hood. Police swarmed. Winston signaled his men, running forward to form a blockade around the smoking wreck. James and Brooke peered over the planter, hearts hammering. Was this the sabotage team, caught in the act? Doors flung open. One occupant stumbled out, unsteady. Shots rang out again. Police demanded he drop any weapons. The man collapsed to his knees, hands raised. The second occupant tried to bolt from the passenger side, but officers tackled him to the ground. Within seconds, both suspects were cuffed, the night reverberating with shouts and sirens. James felt a surge of relief so strong it nearly buckled his knees. Could these be the culprits behind all the terror? Yet a gnawing doubt lingered. He'd seen at least two distinct individuals inside his mansion earlier, a man in a red tie and a hooded figure. Were these the same people, or part of a larger group? The final outcome was uncertain, but at least the immediate danger seemed contained. Brooke exhaled shakily, pressing a hand to her forehead. Please tell me this nightmare is almost over. James gave her a weary look. I hope so. Let's see who we've actually caught. An hour after the dramatic chase and crash, the Raines estate was a patchwork of flashing police lights, scattered guests departing in a slow trickle, and local news crews gathered beyond the tall wrought iron gates. The once grand gala lay in disarray, tables overturned, displays wrecked, the main mansion powerless. James Garrison stood by an ambulance at the edge of the driveway, providing his statement to Lieutenant McSill. Brooke Hayes hovered close, shoulders drooping in exhaustion. Her nurse's instincts kept her alert for anyone needing medical attention, but mostly her mind reeled from the night's harrowing events. Morgan flipped her notepad shut. We've identified the two suspects from the SUV. One is Thomas Flint, known for hacking and corporate espionage, possibly hired by your competitors. The other is Jared Fulton, an ex-security consultant with a grudge against your firm. Both were armed with stolen access passes. We suspect they planted sabotage devices throughout your estate. James's brows knitted. Did they explain the motive? Not in detail, Morgan replied, sighing. They keep saying someone else is in charge. Could be an even bigger scheme. We'll keep investigating. Meanwhile, the bomb squad's clearing the mansion. No sign of large explosives yet, just tampered wiring. Winston Reyes joined them, wincing from bruised ribs he got during the basement scuffle. Thank you, Lieutenant. We'll remain vigilant for any accomplices. Then he turned to James. Sir, I'm sorry we couldn't stop them sooner. James placed a hand on Winston's shoulder. You did everything possible. Lives were saved tonight because of your team's swift response. A wave of relief washed over Winston's stern features. He gave a curt nod and went off to monitor the property's final sweep. Brooke softly cleared her throat. James, your heart, are you okay? She placed a gentle hand on his wrist, feeling for his pulse. The beat still thudded a little too fast. He offered a tired half-smile. "Better now that you're here. You've been my guardian angel since that day in the hospital. Thank you for not letting me shrug off this threat." Her cheeks warmed. "I wish you'd canceled the party outright, but we made it, and hopefully raised some funds before everything fell apart." She looked around at the mansion's dark windows. "I'm so sorry it ended like this." James exhaled. "The fundraiser can be rescheduled, or I'll donate the remainder myself if needed. People's safety matters more." Then, searching her face, he added quietly, "You saved me, Brooke. In more ways than one." The weight of the night settled between them, a swirl of fear, relief, and unspoken gratitude. Even as first responders loaded the crashed SUV onto a tow truck and news cameras captured the final glimpses of the once glamorous gala, James felt an undercurrent of hope. He was still alive. The sabotage was thwarted. The philanthropic dream could be revived another day. By 1 a.m., the estate emptied of guests. The only remaining vehicles were police cruisers, security SUVs, and one final ambulance for routine checks. Lieutenant Morgan gave James a final handshake. "We'll update you as soon as we learn more about the mastermind behind this. For now, get some rest, Mr. Garrison." He nodded gratefully, turning to Brooke as the police pulled away. "The manor's dark, but I can't leave until I'm sure my staff is safe. You should go home. I'll have Winston drive you." She pressed her lips together. "I'm not leaving you alone in that big house without power, especially after everything that happened." A soft smile tugged at her mouth. "I'll stay at least until you're settled. Doctor's orders." A quiet laugh escaped him, the first genuine sign of humor all evening. "All right, nurse. Let's go inside. We'll find flashlights, maybe candles. Then see if the bomb squad has left any safe corners for us." They ventured past the ambulance lights, stepping through the main doors into the faint glow of emergency lamps. The grand foyer was eerily silent, the enormous windows revealing a starry sky. Brooke found a couple of flashlights in a storage closet. Their beams danced along the marble floors, illuminating scattered decorations, half-empty glasses, and toppled chairs, a testament to what was supposed to have been a night of celebration. James took a shaky breath. "I can't believe this is how the night ended. All that planning, months of organizing, undone by sabotage." Brooke pointed the flashlight at his face, her eyes kind. "Undone? Or tested? If you ask me, your mission isn't destroyed. It's just delayed. You'll rebuild, stronger security, better precautions. And if you need any help, medical or otherwise, I'll be here." He felt an unexpected lump in his throat. "I'm so grateful, Brooke, for everything." He gently lowered the flashlight, letting darkness settle around them again. "You're right. Tonight was a test, and we passed." They made their way to a quieter corner of the lounge. Across the estate, Winston's men were finishing final checks. Tomorrow, an entire world of press and speculation awaited. But for this moment, James allowed himself to feel only relief and gratitude. He inhaled, letting the night's tension ebb. "If you told me 3 hours ago that we'd be chasing saboteurs in my own basement." She raised an eyebrow, finishing his sentence with a wry grin. "You would have said I was being overprotective, right?" He chuckled softly. "Yes, and I would have been very wrong. Thank you for joining us on this tense and heartfelt journey, where courage and compassion triumphed over sabotage and fear. If you found yourself gripped by this story, there's so much more to explore. Please consider subscribing to Soul Stirring Stories, a channel dedicated to bringing you inspiring, suspenseful, and deeply human tales. Your support keeps the stories flowing and reminds us that, even in our darkest moments, hope and resilience can shine through. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button on the Soul Stirring Stories channel, and continue with us on more amazing journeys that spark the imagination and stir the soul. Thank you for reading, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the smallest warning can make the biggest difference.